Welcome, Mr. Chidambaram, to this conversation with the Hindu in the middle of the pandemic and after elections have been concluded to 4 states and one union territory. I'm going to get straight into our discussion and ask you, Mr. Chidambaram, what do you think about the electoral outcomes in the assembly elections, especially in West Bengal and Tamil Nadu? And what do you see as the implications for national politics?
Well, that's a very broad question, so let's break it into parts. I'm very happy that both in West Bengal and Tamil Nadu, and in another sense in Kerala, the regional parties have been able to stop the juggernaut of the BJP. In Kerala, they've drawn a blank, I think. In Tamil Nadu, they've got a toehold in 4 constituencies, but in 2 of them, they won by very, very small margins. And in Bengal, their myth has been exploded and they've been reduced to a principal opposition party. So the famed juggernaut of the BJP has been stopped in these 3 states. In Assam, of course, they have retained power thanks to the political power, government power, money power, and the crafty leadership of a couple of their leaders. I concede that they won fair and square in Assam, but I think it's been established beyond doubt that if the regional parties get their act together and the Congress makes wise choices, it's possible to stop the BJP and roll back their advance. As far as the Congress is concerned, it's a pretty bleak picture. We could not regain Kerala. We could not retain Puducherry. We could not regain Assam. And we are blanked out in West Bengal. The only consolation is in Tamil Nadu. But in Tamil Nadu, let's be fair and concede that our 18 seats is because we made a wise alliance with the DMK. For national politics, this is not yet a turning point, but could be the beginning of a turning point if the opposition parties, the 13 opposition parties who issued a statement yesterday on Corona, if the 13 opposition parties understand the nature of India's polity today and adjust with each other and present a formidable non-BJP front. That's perfectly possible. It's perfectly doable, but I hope it will happen.
Mr. Chidambaram, on this issue, I think it is possibly for the first time that the West Bengal Assembly will have no left members and will have no members of the Congress party either. That's a radical shift in West Bengal's politics. Is this a signal to both the left parties and the Congress that the way they functioned and the way they existed, that age is over? And the signal from the people is very clear that you have to change to become relevant. Would you agree with such a proposition?
I can't speak for the left parties. So they have blanked in West Bengal, but they have scored a thumping victory in Kerala. So what lessons they will draw is for their Politburo and their Central Committee to decide. Speaking for myself and the Congress party, I have held the view for long that national parties must reinvent themselves in order to have their state parties closer to the people. Why do regional parties win? Because they are much closer to the people and the buck stops at the level of the state leader. There's nobody in Delhi to kick the ball to. Therefore, the national parties must reinvent themselves to accept the reality of politics today. People want leaders they know, they trust, they share their culture, they share their language, and they want the bulk of the decisions to be taken by those leaders. So I think the National Party must reinvent itself into a truly federal party. It can't be entirely federal because it's a national party, but within the national party, there must be a large degree of autonomy and decision-making power delegated to the state units, and the state unit must be held responsible for victory and defeat.
But defying this paradigm, which you suggested, which possibly makes complete sense, is the BJP and its growth. And here you have a very tightly controlled, centralized political party where decisions are taken at the level of two, possibly. And this is a party which has met with enormous electoral success. So how do we look at both these the scenarios?
Remember, the Congress party also met with enormous, unprecedented electoral success in the first 30-35 years, when it was a centralized party even then. The point is, the BJP has transited from a party that respects state units to a centralized party post-Modi. And they will pay the price now. They will pay the price now if they don't trust state leaders and if they start imposing decisions from above. Initially, it will bring dividends, but in the long run, the BJP will face the same problems as the Congress is facing.
Do you feel that the corona pandemic, did it play a big role, especially in the 8th-phase election in West Bengal? What is your sense of the results on that count?
Well, I can't really pinpoint the reason why the West Bengal elections results turned out what they are. But I know that traveling the length and breadth of Tamil Nadu, being in close touch with the people over the last nearly 5 months in preparation for elections, the pandemic and the sharp deterioration in the last 2 months has completely dented the image of the BJP as a doer, as a fit and proper to run a central government. The BJP was always suspect in the minds of the Tamil people, but then their image that they had built, that they were a doer, and what is that? Modi Hai, Mumkin Hai kind of thing. That has been exploded. He's proved himself, his ministers have proved themselves to be completely incompetent. So that has played a major part in Tamil Nadu, and I assume it would have been a major factor in Bengal, especially in the last 5 rounds, which took place after the surge.
Mr. Chidambaram, since you refer to the issue of Tamil Nadu, I guess given the rather concentrated focus of the BJP on West Bengal, perhaps Tamil Nadu has not got the attention that it deserves. But there's been a significant shift in the politics with the election of the DMK and Mr. Stalin's likely elevation as chief minister. And this is a very big state of India. So how significant will this change? Because if you see, the previous government was quite willing to play along with the BJP in some senses, which possibly the new government might not. So do you see any significance in that?
No, Mr. Stalin can play an important role. I was very happy to note that he was one of the 13 signatories to the statement yesterday, which means he has clearly declared his intention to be considered as part of the opposition bloc, rather than what the AIDMK was. But a state government has to work with the central government. So I will concede that he must be given a degree of latitude so that he can work with the central government. Otherwise, he'll be starved of funds. All kinds of pressures will come upon him, which is, I think, a perfectly legitimate concern. So he should work with the central government. But if the central government's policies or interests conflict with or collide with the state governments and the people of Tamil Nadu's interests, I expect him to stand up for the interests of the people of Tamil Nadu, rather than like the AIDMK, which bent and crawled before the Prime Minister and the Home Minister and every emissary from Delhi.
Mr. Chidambaram, of late, you have been writing a lot about the corona pandemic, and rightly so, given its importance. And you've even gone to the extent of asking for the resignation of the health minister in your tweets and in the column that you wrote for the Indian Express. As someone who's been in government for long, what do you think needs to be done now?
Oh, a number of things. Leave alone the resignation of the health minister is proved to be completely incompetent. And in any other democracy, the health minister would have tendered his resignation many days ago. Here, one has to demand a resignation. And there's no response from the government because Mr. Modi will never accept his government's failure, be that as it may. What needs to be done is quite evident. What needs to be done is rapidly escalate the testing and the vaccination rollout. On both counts, the government is failing. Your own newspaper, The Hindu, today has published a chart, a statistical chart, showing that the pace of vaccination has fallen and it continues to fall. The reason why it's fallen and falling is obvious, because there are not sufficient vaccines. There are not sufficient vaccine doses. Remember, on April 2, we vaccinated 42 lakh people. We have never touched that number. The average for the whole month of April fell to about 29 lakhs per day. And we are now into May, and I think the average is falling. So we are not vaccinating because we don't have vaccine doses. So the first thing is ramp up the supply of vaccines. You can't ramp up the production of vaccines overnight, but there are ways in which we can ramp up the supply of vaccines. Imports, obviously, and then compulsory licensing and license 3-4 other vaccine manufacturers to manufacture Covishield and Covaxin. So the government has the power.
If you were in government, you would have gone in for this.
Absolutely, absolutely. We did it in 2008. We did it in 2008 for the cancer medicine. So we have done it before and we will do it. I would have done it on the first day. I would have immediately told Covishield and Covaxin, listen, until you raise your production capacity. All right, what is your timeline? From 100 million a month to 500 million a month. You will take 6 months or 1 year. From 10 million a month to 100 million a month for Covaxin, you will take 6 months. For 6 months, I will compulsory license some other manufacturer to manufacture the vaccine. When your capacity is in place, we can always cancel that compulsory license. See, these are emergency measures. Please read Section 92, Section 100, and Section 102 of the Indian Patent Act. These provisions are entirely consistent with the TRIPS agreement and the Doha Declaration. In fact, we fought for these 3 clauses. We have these 3 clauses in the law made by Parliament. And if you don't invoke them today, when will you invoke them? Why are they there? Are they ornaments? They are emergency provisions, and this is a national emergency. So the idea is to ramp up the supplies and production and vaccinate as many people as possible. I calculated in my column, at the present rate, they will take 8 months to vaccinate 70 crore people. And by that time, it might be too late. The other thing is, you have to test. I know in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, there's no testing. They are not testing, they are finding fewer people. Don't test, don't find. You have to test to find out what the positivity rate is. If you don't test, you stop testing tomorrow, the positivity rate will fall to 0. Can you claim that is a victory? I thought it was elementary. These are the 2 things they have to done immediately.
You've also spoken that there should be an empowered group of no more than 9 people who should be appointed by the Prime Minister to tackle this national emergency. Do you think that's a viable proposition at this time?
Absolutely. Yes. When Rajiv Gandhi handled the famine, he set up an empowered group and ask that to take the decisions. They will report to him or to a cabinet committee once in 3 or 4 days, and the cabinet committee will receive the recommendations and report on the steps taken and intervene only by exception. See, these are decisions which have to be taken round the clock. You can't have a prime minister taking a decision to convert, say for example, can we convert nitrogen plants into oxygen plants? Now, is this a matter for the Prime Minister of India? Should it not have occurred to the officer who's in the Ministry of Chemicals or Ministry of Health or Ministry of Steel? And they should have taken this decision long, long ago. For running an oxygen express, should it be a decision taken by the Prime Minister at a meeting? Why didn't the Railway Minister think of it? For steel plants to supply their liquid oxygen, why did it require the Prime Minister to give a directive? That is because this government is a one-person government. And Mr. Modi wants all decisions in his name, all credit to him. And if there is a failure, he'll pass the buck to the states. The steel minister should have taken this decision long ago. See, I have taken and I've attended hundreds of review meetings. A proper review is where you sit down and ask question after question after question. There are a myriad dots in a plan. We don't have a planning commission today, so everybody's forgotten what planning is. There are a myriad dots in a plan. We'll have to join the dots. We'll have to understand which dot joins which dot. This can be only done by a dedicated group doing nothing else. Doing nothing else. Please tell me, will Dr. Guleria run the aims, or will he come on television and speak to people, or will he take decisions? Is this the way to use Dr. Guleria's services? And Dr. Paul, he's a member of the Niti Aayog. Will he do planning, or will he do explanations on television, or will he advise the Prime Minister? You need an empowered group to reach out to people, get inputs, take decisions. And that can only be done by an empowered group. It's been done before. We called it crisis management group. We have called it this, we have called it that. But empowered group, for example, after the Bombay, Mumbai terror attack, and I moved to the Home Ministry, 2 days thereafter, I decided that I will hold a meeting every day with the National Security Advisor, the Home Secretary, the Director of IB, and the Secretary RNAW, and the Special Secretary Security. The 5 of us will meet every day, hell or high water, every day at 10 o'clock, adjusted by about half an hour or so for my convenience or the NSA's convenience. And every day, the 5 plus I will take the decisions for that day. When I realized that the big decisions were being taken, but the sub-decisions were being delayed, I set up the MAC, the Multi-Agency Center, where every agency was represented. Every day it will meet, every day it will disseminate and share information, and every day action will be taken. That's the only way it can be done. How can a minister do it? As Home Minister, if I can't do it, how can a Prime Minister do it? I want to know.
So coming back to the issue of invoking compulsory licensing,
Yes.
That's something that even the Supreme Court had observed, had inquired. Former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh also had given this suggestion in his letter. But there is also this view that it may sort of disincentivize vaccine producers for future R&D. What is your view?
Wrong. For every vaccine produced under compulsory licensing, the original inventor, manufacturer will get a royalty. And I've made it clear a few minutes ago, this compulsory licensing is only a bridging arrangement for the period required for Serum and Bharat Biotech to ramp up their production. If it will take 6 months, we will compulsory license the other vaccine manufacturers for 6 months. And then the license will be cancelled and it will revert back to the original manufacturers.
Mr. Chidambaram, also the Delhi, city of Delhi and other cities, even smaller towns, are seeing a severe shortage of oxygen supplies. Say, if you were in power, how would you address this issue?
See, the first thing you should ask yourself is, how does oxygen reach a hospital? Where is it produced? I would have listed all the sources of oxygen. See, oxygen is a limitless, unlimited quantity. It's there in atmosphere. All you've got to take is draw the air from the atmosphere, remove the impurities and the nitrogen and other gases, and it'll become 82% concentrated oxygen, which is what is administered to patients. It is transported in liquid form or in cylinders. So it's not rocket science. So all we have to identify is, first line, who are the suppliers of oxygen today? 2, who are the potential suppliers of oxygen today? 3, where are the production centers of oxygen and likely production centers of oxygen? I mean, it's a step-by-step, it's a management decision-making process. Anyone familiar with management decision-making will go through the steps. You will find there are 100 steps to be listed one after another. But there are people in this country competent. They are running $100 billion enterprises. I'm sure there are competent people who can drop the 100 steps in a matter of 24 hours. And then you decide the action to be taken on each step, authorize somebody, empower somebody to follow up and take the action. It can't wait for a review by the Prime Minister. And pardon me, even if I were Prime Minister, how is the Prime Minister, given his background, education, political career, etc., or any person, forget Mr. Modi, how is he competent? And I'm not using competence in any other sense, simply managerial competence to take all these decisions. I want to know, is it possible for any human being to take these decisions?
Well, I think our time is running out, Mr. Chidambaram. I thought we were posing the questions to you, but you have posed many to us and to our viewers. Thank you very much for joining the Hindu in this special conversation on the assembly election results and the ongoing pandemic in the country. Thank you so much, and thanks.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Sandeep.